My favorite comic book character of all time, Ms. Marvel, finally has her own show. However, the path to her getting that show has been a rough one, with many fans crying out about certain changes made to the character and Kevin Feige and Marvel just kinda hand-waving it off. I didn't have necessarily high hopes for Ms. Marvel's MCU debut. And now that I have seen the first episode, I still don't. I liked Ms. Marvel's premiere outing, but I didn't love it. And as someone who will go out of their way to experience and enjoy anything with Kamala Khan's face plastered on it like the consumerist pig I am, that's concerning. Hey everyone, I'm RVRocks, and let's just dive right into Ms. Marvel, because this show's biggest strong suit is its first impression. It opens with this papercraft recreation of the Battle of Earth from Avengers Endgame, described the same way as any sweaty neckbeard on the internet would, which is to say, with a large focus on how pivotal Captain Marvel was. You see, Kamala Khan, local teenager and our protagonist, is a bit of a Carol Danvers stan, and she is your textbook nerd. She writes fanfiction, she makes YouTube videos, she does the whole cosplay thing, and Captain Marvel is the Blorbo from her shows. And Kamala is easily the best part of this show. I had no doubts Iman Vellani was perfect casting, but seeing her in motion just confirmed that for me. She maintains that remarkably likable, yet incredibly awkward teenage status that I think is necessary for this character to work. And not just Iman, but the entire cast is really good in my opinion. The main Khan family in particular. I think they also very much toe the line of having really deep character flaws, but maintain their likability regardless. Particularly Yusuf, who, low-key as a fan, I thought he would have the biggest shoes to fill in live action. That one scene with him in the Hulk costume still has me feeling really bummed out about it. Are you still sad, editing RV? On the other hand, Bruno. I didn't hate him as much as I expected to, but this poor actor still just rubs me the wrong way. Sorry, Matt, but you're really just not doing it for me. Also, the surprise appearance of one Anjali Bhimani had me popping off. She has got to be one of my favorite personalities since the Overwatch days, and seeing her in this was just so pleasant. And I think pleasant is a good word to describe most of my feelings about watching this show. Especially in the wake of a lot of creators talking about quote-unquote MCU fatigue, Ms. Marvel does a lot different visually to make it stand out. This show has some of the best and worst CGI in any of these Marvel shows, with a lot of the normal, what you would expect Marvel CGI looking, frankly, whack as hell. But if all of that looks so bad in service of the other, more directorially interesting instances of special effects, I am willing to accept that sacrifice. Kamala's powers may look weird, but goddamn is this show striking to watch. With text conversations being displayed in interesting ways, visually engaging camera work, and a lot of instances of animation to accompany Kamala's inner monologue. All these people on the internet told me that they undid Kamala's powers because of a strict CGI budget, and based on the older Marvel shows, I had no reason to doubt this argument, but I don't know, man. If all of this can look this good, maybe they could have done the big hands. And speaking of big hands, that brings me to the stretchy, fleshy elephant in the room that is her powers. And well, I am neither here nor there on the issue as of right now. I have a whole video on this topic if you want my take on why them changing her powers in the first place was a big misstep, but in the context of episode 1 of Ms. Marvel, the MCU show, it's not terrible, but I don't like it either. I stand by with a lot of my criticisms I made in that other video. It's less visually interesting, it doesn't inform her character as much, the CGI looks whack as fuck anyways, and nearly all of the problems she came across with her powers in this episode could have easily have been solved by her, well, stretching. Just like you, my friends, should stretch your way over to that subscribe button. My main beef with the powers in its current state is less the change of powers and more the origin of her powers in the MCU, because this is a ticking time bomb that will go off. The fact that her powers are because of some magic artifact that is highly implied to be linked with her heritage and ancestors, it's not a good look. In the comic, her powers came about because she had latent inhuman DNA. A brown girl being inhuman. Wow, look at all that subtext. But in the MCU, her powers being a gift from her ancestors is a lame Asian stereotype that was already featured in a Disney movie this year. We likely have 5 more episodes of this show before we know the full story behind this thing, but if it is at all what I expect it to be, it will be a huge disappointment. I think my biggest criticism with the show, aside from the whole powers debacle, comes in 2 forms. Firstly, the overall story of the show hasn't really started yet, so I can't necessarily critique any of that yet, but I will say that they spend a lot of time establishing the world. And let's be clear, I loved all of this slice of life stuff with Kamala and her family and friends. But we spend so much time in the introductory episode just enjoying this slice of life setting that when the actual plot gets started, it feels oddly rushed. While the AvengerCon stuff was neat aesthetically and very true to actual conventions I have been to, once they enter that building, the plot just kinda rockets forward and never gives itself a moment to breathe until the credits hit. Which is a shame because I would have loved a little more time in this setting. It has a very fun self-referential energy without coming off as too much of a jerk-off of their own IP, unlike other Disney projects. And I just want to mention here, because I don't know where else in the video I can put this, retconning the original Miss Marvel costume into being a slutty Captain Marvel outfit is the funniest shit I have seen in an MCU project in quite some time. My other big criticism is that we, as the audience, are constantly told she is weird, but she never really shows how weird she is. Maybe it's just because nowadays, in real life, Marvel stuff is more general pop culture than it is nerd culture, but the brief amount of nerdy stuff we see Kamala do is very basic and not that nerdy. I mean, everyone has a YouTube channel nowadays. We never see her write any of her own fan fiction. The biggest nerd thing we do see her doing in detail is cosplay, and well, I don't think it's that nerdy. I mean, even the popular girl is doing it. And speaking of Zoe, the popular girl, it's 2022, and I think I'm done seeing television shows that take place in a high school setting where there is some generic bully character. This isn't how high school was for me or any of my peers, and we were the nerds. And I think for a show that technically takes place in 1 year's time from now, it probably wouldn't be for them either. In the comics, Zoe is kinda racist, at first, and ignorantly so, but she wasn't a generic bully who hated Kamala because she was a nerd. She didn't even hate Kamala. She was more so just an ass full of backhanded compliments. And making her into just another generic bully slash popular girl feels like a step backwards with her character, which is so strange. And honestly, this applies to the show in its entirety. As a whole, this feels like a step backwards for the Miss Marvel mythos. This is almost like a reverse Shang-Chi scenario. Rather than having a kinda lame and generic source material developed into a new and interesting property, we had a new and interesting property developed into an overall more generic interpretation of the entire thing. With a lot of the characters regressed to their more basic elements, a lot of the commentary on current social issues is a lot more understated, and even Kamala's powers are just some kind of mystical South Asian artifact. It feels like a first draft that would get changed for a modern adaptation, except this is the modern adaptation. But in complete fairness, it's only episode 1, and as with a lot of the MCU shows, I'm willing to bet we will get radically different as we go on, if nothing else. So before I go forming any more random opinions, I guess we'll just have to see what happens in episode 2. And if you want to see me talk about episode 2, then why don't you subscribe to RV Rocks and ring the bell, like this video, and comment your thoughts on Miss Marvel. I'm thinking I'm going to talk about the whole series in a format similar to this, episode by episode, but who knows, maybe, maybe not. One thing is for sure though, whatever comes next, I will have much less to talk about than this introductory video, so make sure to keep notified either by ringing the bell or following me on Twitter at RVRocks. But before you do any of that, I have been RV Rocks, and thank you so much for watching. See ya!